So welcome to Stability Now, getting proactive about the child welfare workforce. My name is John Kelly. I am the co-executive director of Fostering Media Connections, which is a national nonprofit that uses the power of media and journalism to lead the conversation about children, youth, and families in America. We have three, just to tell you a little bit about us, we have three kind of core programs here at FMC. We have the Imprint, which is our daily news site. It covers child welfare, youth justice, and youth homelessness all around the country. Fostering Families Today, which is our bi-monthly magazine. It goes right into the homes of foster and kinship parents and caregivers, as well as adoptive parents. We just crossed the 30,000 mark on subscribers to that. So a big win recently for us with Fostering Families Today, and Youth Voice program, through which we either through partnerships or direct recruitment work with youth and young adults who have experience in either having experienced foster care or incarceration or youth homelessness, to expose them to the world of journalism and also just basic writing skills on things like op-eds and memoir pieces and all kinds of great stuff that we do with those guys. And then if you have an interest in what we're doing and want to check out our stuff on a regular basis, you can always visit the site for the Imprint, which is imprintnews.org. Or check our newsletters out. We have a weekly one for Imprint and Youth Voice work. We have some regional ones where we have particularly a lot of staff, California, New York, and Texas, as well as some Youth Voice and Fostering Families Today. The links are right here on the screen, bit.ly/Imprint newsletters and bit.ly/Fostering Families newsletters. And you can also just quick, easier hack, go to the top right of the Imprint website and you can subscribe to all of these. And before we get started in earnest here, let me just thank quickly our sponsor for today's discussion, who is Binti, grounded in extensive research with youth, families, and social workers. Binti's mobile-friendly platform promotes partnerships, drives better outcomes, and saves social workers time. So we truly thank Binti for sponsoring this conversation today. So today's discussion, if the name sounded a little familiar to you and you're a Seinfeld fan, I did borrow conceptually from the classic episode where Frank Costanza, George's dad, is advised by his therapist to repeat the mantra "serenity now" anytime he's about to go into a rage, which, if you like Seinfeld, you know happens all the time on the show. And the reason I guess I picked it because the lesson of the episode is that simply, just accepting problems as inevitable and not taking them on has kind of a low likelihood of success. And as that very loosely translates to the issues facing child welfare workforce today, I wanted to do an event where we could feature some panelists who are going to just talk about different ways that their respective entities, their organizations, have kind of endeavored to not just chant serenity now into the ether, but really assess and kind of move the needle on issues like recruitment of workers, retaining workers, worker well-being, and more. We step into this, and I'm not like, this is obviously a forward-looking, proactive discussion. Just to quickly go over what I think most people who have joined us for this know, workforce challenges are not new to the world of child welfare, but they have certainly been exacerbated in recent years by the COVID-19 pandemic, by social and economic challenges and disruptions. Just some of the things that have happened, higher than usual turnover. We were talking kind of before we launched about some of the nightmarish things happening out there with that right now. The one that always kind of sticks in my mind from what we've reported is the Pulaski County, which is Little Rock in Arkansas, has seen the number of foster youth double at the same time while experiencing 105% turnover of their frontline workforce. And when we asked, so I had to ask the director, how did that number get so bad that it's over 100%? She said 2 of the jobs turned over twice. Other factors, obviously, rising wages elsewhere. There are jobs that child welfare workers might consider in other places that have become higher paying. That's a good thing macroeconomically. Higher wages is good, but that is obviously a challenge for the field. And then the social work pipeline. We've heard, in our reporting at FMC and elsewhere that there's a real issue with social work students pursuing other avenues than child welfare, and so that's become a real issue as well. And then, of course, COVID-19 just in and of itself, right, as a health pandemic, the social isolation rules, the health concerns have obviously impacted and taken the workforce challenges to a new level. But again, we are here to talk about ways in which you don't have to just sit there and take that. There are things that people have done, things that people are doing to improve this. So let's meet the panelists real quick, and then I'm going to turn it over to them because I want you to hear as much as possible from them. When these guys are done, we'll do as much Q&A as possible at the end of that so that we can get their questions to you. I would just ask, if you have a question or comment for the panelists, throw that into the chat. That's the easiest way for me and my colleagues at FMC to kind of monitor it. So without further ado, we have Andrew Sweet, CEO of Children's Home Society of Florida. We have Barry Chafkin, CEO of Fostering Change for Children. Leslie Calloway of the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services. And then we have sort of via video, Dr. Jay Miller. Now, Dr. Miller is the Dean of the University of Kentucky School of Social Work, which has launched the Self-Care Lab to kind of study and work on innovation within the concepts of, worker well-being, particularly social worker well-being. He is in the final stages today of bringing home a doctoral defense for one of his longtime students. So he couldn't be here, but he did want to contribute to the discussion. So I will, at the end, after you've heard from Andrew and Leslie and Barry, I'll play a short video where he's going to talk a little bit about the Self-Care Lab. So without further ado, let me pass it to Andrew to lead us off and talk about some of the things that the Children's Home Society of Florida has been doing in terms of workforce stability.
All right, thank you, John. So in Florida, Children's Home Society, we deliver a variety of services, not just child welfare, but about 1,300 employees statewide, everything from home visiting, counseling, and case management. So a variety of health and human services positions we're trying to fill, and certainly have experienced, I'm sure, a lot of the same workforce challenges that you have. But today we wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of talking about how we've been rethinking our strategies around child welfare, because that has been and can be the biggest pain point when it comes to turnover in our workforce. And it's not unique. I mean, certainly the pandemic has coming on the other side of this has exacerbated those workforce challenges, but they typically have been pretty cyclical in child welfare. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today is the story of Case AIM. And this actually kind of came about during one of those crisis points back in 2014, when there was a pretty big expose by the Miami Herald called Innocence Lost that really highlighted some of the failures of the child protection system. And it created a very big spike in removals across the state, and it overwhelmed the workforce in child welfare. And so we really had all eyes and attention on what are we going to do to better support our case managers in the field so that we don't see this continued turnover. And that's really what the kind of the beginning of Case AIM. At the time, we had some friends over at Microsoft that said, the way that we tackle challenges like you're describing is we do persona profiles. And so they actually kind of taught us on this tool that they use. We went around the state and observed case managers in the field doing what they do every day and listening to them and listening to what their pain points were. And not surprisingly, 80% of their work was administrative, and that was weighing on them. And that's not why they entered the field. And so the 20% of their time that they could actually spend engaging with families, they weren't getting enough of that time. They were overwhelmed, they were stressed, and the administrative paperwork was weighing them down. So while some of the information we get back, yes, compensation is an issue, a lot of it does come back to that workload, because at the end of the day, the compensation isn't enough to balance out the challenges they face in the field with all that workload. So we decided, what if we flip that? What if 80% of their time was actually doing the things that they entered the field to do, and only 20% was administrative? How would we do that? And so what you see on the screen right there is the things that were important to case managers, what they wanted to spend their time on. And we had to figure out a way to make that 80% of their job and really reduce that administration behind the scenes. And so we, at the time, also partnered with an economic modeling firm called Strategic Engineering Economic Consultants, I think it's SEEK. And they took 5 years of our child welfare administrative data and all of our HR data, and they threw it into a Monte Carlo simulation and looked at what's the impact of one single turnover event in the lives of the children that we served. And what they found was that children in foster care spent an average of 4.5 months longer in care when they accounted for all the other variables that were going on in these cases, 4.5 months longer in care. And so, and then the probability, 53% increased probability these youth would age out. And if they age out, we know from the KC data that the societal impact of that, on the cost to society are huge. So we knew we had a compelling reason to do something and to do something differently. And so with the friends at Microsoft, we did a series of hackathons. And we said, how can we start organizing all of this administrative stuff that falls on the case managers and pull it behind the scenes? Now, some of that we can automate through technology. Some of it, maybe we need to have kind of this mindset of air traffic control. So you see a little picture there. How do we take all of that, managing transportation, supervised visitation, scheduling, really, and looking at the home visits that the case managers do. How do we start automating some things to make sure that they don't miss anything, because we have a lot of new folks out there. How do we take some of the safety factors within the CFSR and actually build it into some technology and tools so that things are automated for them so that they don't have to manage so many different things? So this was everything we kind of pulled behind the scenes. Some of these things we automated, some of these things we actually had a team, we called a unified support center team, that was basically one administrative case manager could support up to 10 case managers in the field. And they did a lot of the things that you see there on the screen. Some of those things were still manual because we couldn't automate everything. And they were all the checks and balances in that accountability structure for case management. And as they started getting better and doing things more efficiently, like transportation, you can imagine the logistics around transportation when you centralize it. All the caseworkers had to do was put in a ticket and say, I need this transport. This group took care of it. And as we did it smarter, it actually gave capacity to those administrative case managers to start thinking more proactively, start calling foster parents. Do you have everything you need? How can we help you? Is there anything else that we can do to help support your placement? And so that was the concept of Case AIM. It was a people, process, and technology solution that we wrapped around case management. And we asked the economic modeling firm to come back and tell us how we were doing. And so the next slide, actually, before I get to outcomes, I do want to share a little bit about the app. So the technology piece of this, basically what we did was we were able to get our data from the SACWA system. So in Florida, it's the Florida Save Families Network. We were able to pull all of our data and put it into a series of apps. So the case managers going out in the field had their face sheets. They knew exactly what was going on in that case. And you can imagine when you do have turnover, how important it is to have the information of that case at the fingertips of the case manager. And so those apps were a single place, easy place for them to make sure they were up to speed as they were going out, to do their next visit. They had all the information right there. We also, over the years, started looking at ways that we could better assign cases. We looked at high risk factors with our children, and how do we do a better job matching them to case managers who have that expertise and that specialty to handle some of the higher risk cases. So we built in tools like that. We built in a referral management app so the case managers could see when their clients were referred to services and if they followed up on services. And all of that to say they had those tools right there, not only in their phone, but in their laptops in the field. And so, so what did we find? Well, before I get into this slide, the first study was done by Seek, the modeling firm. And within the first 5 months of piloting Case AIM, we had 0 voluntary turnover in the pilot units, 0 in 5 months. And so by the time we had finished the first pilot phase, which was 14 months in, what Seek did was they looked at all of our previous historical data, all of that data I told you about that they had looked at before. And they said, based on what we know about this unit and the types of children you're serving, we would expect there would be 14 voluntary turnover events. In the Case AIM units in that pilot, there were only 5. So there was a significant difference between what we expected turnover to be and what it actually was based on the interventions we were using at the time. I can't draw a complete causal, direction on that because it's just data from those data sets. But we said, how do we take this to the next level? Because we think we have something here. And so we went to the legislature and got an appropriation to expand the model to other sites, and then to partner with the Florida Institute of Child Welfare to do a more in-depth evaluation looking at the differences between case management with Case AIM and case management without. And so what they found was what you see on the slide here was that children who were supported, the case managers were supported in those Case AIM units had 100 fewer days in care. And some of the other, hold on, let me just pull this up here. Some of the other outcomes that we saw, fewer moves. Now, some of that could have been because we were providing better support through the Unified Support Center to the foster parents. They always had their Medicaid cards. They had everything that they needed, but we did see fewer moves in the Case AIM population, more stability with the case managers, most importantly, just the reduction in turnover over the couple of years of the pilot. And so, so we continue to do Case AIM with case management today in Miami and Orlando and Lakeland here in Florida, and have paired it up with our case management program. Now it costs a little bit more. It's about 10 to 12% more than traditional case management. But when you see the outcomes on the back end, it's not only better for kids, but ultimately there is a reduction in expense on the back end experienced by the system because of what we're doing. So I think that might be it for my slides. But so as we think about today coming, on the heels of this pandemic, I'm not going to say that our turnover is as low as it was when we first implemented Case AIM. Certainly, we experienced some of the same challenges that everybody else is experiencing in case management. But if I didn't have Case AIM, I can only imagine would I have been the 105% turnover, because I'm not able to support my case managers the way that I need to. And so, yes, we've seen spikes in turnover in case management. We were talking about earlier on the phone about some of the dynamics with that, and a lot of there is a lot of placement crises that we're dealing with. We have used our Unified Support Center to try to manage some of those crises. So this helping to support the supervision and of children in the office with those teams on the back end to give the case managers a break. But the Case AIM technology that we developed we couldn't really keep up with it because we're a human services organization. So we did end up partnering with a technology company who helped help keep the apps fresh and up to date and always growing and expanding. And so they just more recently kind of added in a series of dashboards that we use so that I can see in any part of the state what's our turnover, what's our performance, how well are we performing in achieving permanency, how are we doing with our safety metrics. And so so those dashboards have been a great addition to the services so that we can really have eyes on everything and then try to anticipate where as caseloads start creeping up, that's going to start impacting your turnover. So it gives me a little bit better eyes on where we might be coming into, more of a crisis stage with our case management programs. But I'm going to kind of pause right there and see, folks have any questions for me or anything I can help answer.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andrea. And yeah, please, any questions that you have for Andrea, throw them in the chat. We're going to, again, try to get to as many as we can at the end. But of course, she's here, so she can probably respond directly to you on some of them. With that, I'm going to go next to Leslie Calloway. So we've heard from an organizations leader. Leslie is in the executive tier at a state agency. So that's a totally different perspective, but certainly facing some of the same challenges. So Leslie, the floor is yours to tell us what's been going on and what you guys have been working on in Louisiana on the workforce issue.
Thank you, John, and hello, everybody. It's so great to see or meet you guys today, my co-panel members, and to see 135 participants on. So thank you. I'm looking forward to what I can hear and learn from you guys as well as my peers on here. So I am Deputy Assistant Secretary for Workforce Development with Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services. And my focus is on supporting the recruitment, the retention, the whole job satisfaction, and the developmental needs of our workforce. And, we are, just as everyone is, we're rebounding from the residuals of COVID-19. And one thing that we learned in our rebound was it was just really important to let our staff know that we care. And that doesn't cost anything. Our staff, and I'm sure everyone, we have gotten to the pace that we had to move so fast. And we had to continue to work on recovery, but just letting them know that we care about them, our foster parents as well, and just knowing that as a team, we can continue to move past even so much as the COVID-19 pandemic. We've had multiple hurricanes and many disasters here in Louisiana, but what we know at the end of it all is that there are families, there are children and parents that are in need, and that they are relying on us to help meet that need. So we kind of, try to push past the focus on all of the task and try and get to the purpose. And believing that if, people come to us with purpose, it can help them, with job satisfaction and retention. But there were other pieces that we knew we had to address, especially coming off of the pandemic and the wages that we had. We had to address the competitive wages and try to stay in the workforce with other agencies that did not, were not open endlessly. There is behavioral health, there is school systems that you can do social work in, but in DCFS, we don't close, and that was very evident and during that time. So we worked really hard on increasing our pay rates. So we were able to increase our special entrance pay rate at about 25%, moving it up, from the minimal to the first quartile. And we were really proud about that, because we were able to compete in the workforce. In addition, we added a premium pay beginning at $2, $3, and $4 for time spent in the highest turnover programs, which is our CPS investigations, our family services in-home, our foster care programs, and our extended foster care program. So on top of that pay increase, we put an additional premium pay rate into those areas to compensate staff that are in that difficult program. We also try to support, and we're trying to support the reduction by developing a centralized team of managers that work on the case closures for those easy invalid cases, and they process those by phone and taking that work from the field. So trying to reduce as much of the excess administrative work that kind of becomes cumbersome and wears staff down and kind of leads to turnover. Another effort we made was to expand our hiring qualifications, to recognize the qualifications of other experts coming from other fields. If you worked in the education or another social work entity and you're gaining experience there, we are looking for crossover that you can bring that experience into child welfare. So that experience is going to come in and help our workforce. And then we partnered with our agency leaders in conducting mass hiring fairs. We take every opportunity to join in at career fairs at any university and any place that we can conduct, just to advertise, just to market child welfare and advertise anyway that, DCFS and child welfare is a place for you if you want to make a difference for children and families. We've also partnered with the Quality Improvement Center for Workforce Development, and we participated in a job redesign. And Andrea talked about that excessive administrative work that we're responsible for in child welfare that can really lead to burnout, in addition to the extensive field practice that we're responsible for. So in our job redesign, we kind of divided up some of that clinical versus the administrative work, and we've added in a new role that we call a team specialist type role that kind of supports the field staff on getting those referrals made timely, following up on those referrals and completing some of those administrative functions that keep staff bogged down in the office and kind of takes away from the time that they can spend with families. So we've added that role in, and we've expanded it across the state, even adding in some supports from our temp agencies to help with that excessive administrative task that we experience in child welfare that often leads to turnover. In addition to that, just some of the other tasks that take so much time in the field is interviewing. The process of interviewing and getting people to come in and then going through the reference and the paperwork of gathering that was a responsibility of supervisors and managers. And because their work is so heavy right now and so intense, we began the process of building a centralized interview and selection team. So we're hoping to take that burden off of them and try to keep seats filled faster for the vacancies, so that will reduce the impact on staff that are present that may have to take on caseloads for those who left the department, and that would get the system, the team built back faster. So we're hoping if we get people in those seats, that would bring on some support for the offices and the field staff, and that would promote some job satisfaction and some retention for us. In addition, we have an amazing communications department that helps support us in just the media strategies and the communications, so, we know this world is really technology focused and based right now and centered. So any media outlet that we can get to advertise and to share, our recruitment strategies, social media, we're understanding that we have to join in the TikTok world, just to reach as far as we can to get communications out there for this amazing job that we work and to offer that opportunity. And another area that we realized that was probably more important than an exit interview was to conduct stay interviews. Find out in real time what our staff are missing, what they're needing, and how we can improve our work conditions while they're here. So we've recently conducted our second stay interview in the month of May. So we're waiting on the results of that and hoping that we can continue to try to promote some satisfaction in meeting our workforce's needs. And then another thing I'm proud of is that we listened to the need, we looked at our data, and we know that there's a great need for a foster parent increase. We know that that's challenges and that hurts our workforce when there are limited foster parent resources and placements. And when that happens, I mean, the challenges go back to the workforce and the staff, you know, as it's been as severe as just when there's no placement staff or staying in the office, they're spending nights, you know, to take care of our children. And then they're continuing to try to work again in the day. And knowing that you can't sustain that long, that's led to turnover. And in effort to address that matter, we've hired a foster parent recruiter for the state that's going to help focus with our home development department on recruiting more foster parents. And that has been, that was a milestone, and we're happy that we listened and that we're moving forward with that. So we're living in real times and we're having real issues, but we are resilient as a department and we're pivoting, and I am looking forward to the better outcomes and the stabilization of our workforce.
Wow. Thank you, Leslie. So she really covered a whole bunch of stuff that they've been working on in Louisiana for a long period of time. And I think if I remember right, Leslie, in our kind of preparatory conversations, like obviously COVID-19 has had a dramatic impact on even the most prepared agencies and state agencies and organizations. But did I remember right that you guys had it down, like turnover was like 15% or something, like pretty low?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, we had done really well around 2017 and 2018. And after this, we shot up to 23% last year. So we're working our way back down.
Gotcha. All right. So we have heard from an organizational leader, an agency management official. Barry, you work with all kinds of different departments and organizations around the country. So I think let's talk about the perspective you have gleaned from your work all over the place and in different child welfare departments.
Sure. Thanks, John. Excited to be here, by the way. And before I go into our work, I just want to super applaud both Andrea and Leslie. Like, technology helping lighten the caseload, or having case aids, pay raises, foster parents paying attention. Like, none of us have the magic bullet. I think this is really important to listen and take what works in your area. And I want to now talk to people in Louisiana and people in Florida to learn more about what you both shared. So thanks so much for that. Also, John, as Leslie mentioned, TikTok, can you cue the music and I'm ready to go?
We'll do that later.
We will do it later. So my name is Barry Chafkin. I am the CEO and founder of Fostering Change for Children. And kind of as John alluded to, we're more of like a macro system organization that works with systems and agencies. We don't take any foster children into our agency. And our goal was to have creative solutions to problems in the child welfare system. That's literally why we were founded. It wasn't about any one individual kind of foster care, adoption, kinship, any of that. And we've been around 17 years. And today I'm going to talk to you about our Children's Corps program primarily. Children's Corps was created in 2011. So we have over a decade of numbers now. And it was kind of, at the time, it was Teach for America, but for frontline social workers. That was the kind of selling point. If you don't know what Teach for America is, you can Google it and figure it out later. But the idea was, could we bring new people to be excited about this work and get them to stay and be the future leaders? And I'm going to talk about very specific things because we only got 10 minutes. So we have a three-pronged approach. The first prong kind of has two elements to it. It's recruitment and selection. How do you recruit and select your folks? Second prong is training. How do you train them before they start and ongoing? And the third prong is support, an unwavering amount of support to make sure they feel every ounce of your energy to support them, which models for them supporting foster parents, adoptive parents, parents of origin, etc. So that's kind of our mantra. We're also huge on trying to figure out how to do better work as far as being more diverse. And I'll tell you a little bit of our statistics, but our workforce recruitment really looks at how can we have a more diverse workforce. And we've been pretty successful with that the last few years as well. So starting with the first prong, recruitment and selection, there's many different things out there. I'm a big fan of NCWE, and self-disclosure, I'm on their advisory board, but the National Child Welfare Workforce Institute, in my opinion, has one of the best websites that has so many resources for workforce. And I would recommend that you go there if you need to look for any kind of resources on supporting workers, supporting supervisors, different concepts, ideas, training modules that are available online, et cetera. But for us, the website is NCWE. It's National Child Welfare Workforce Institute. I'll ask you to go to Google it and keep moving because I don't have
Yeah,
the
Sharon's on it.
website
Dropped it
quickly
right
available.
away.
Yeah, okay, that you can
Okay.
figure that out. There you go, Sharon. Oh, hey, Sharon.
Yeah.
I got a small endorsement for you to mention them, by the way, no big deal. But the truth is, recruitment and selection in our mind is the most important, because if you're not picking the right person, why are you training them? You don't want them to stay, right? If you pick the right person who really wants to do the work, actually, they'll figure out the other stuff. Like if I want to do this work no matter what, I believe in working with children and families, I'll figure out whatever the paperwork is, or family court, or understanding more about clinical issues. So we think recruitment and selection is critical. We do our recruitment in a very unique way. You can go to our website eventually or contact us. We have a way to teach people how to do what we do. So you don't have to do children's court in your backyard. We could teach how do we do recruitment, selection, training, and support. And our recruitment is based on realistic job descriptions. We literally try to talk people out of the job. We tell them how hard it is, how terrible it is. We have a self-screening tool. Are you willing to walk into buildings where there's no elevators? You're going to smell urine in some places. There's going to be cockroaches. I mean, we're really real about some of the conditions that you may have to put up with and deal with. And then we remind them some of our children and families have to live in those places as well. And so if you can't deal with that, then you can't be a caseworker. Like you have to be willing to deal with challenging stuff. So we have characteristics and traits that we look for. We have both the interview, the application and interview process is scored with our own model of how to look for empathy, non-judgmental, patience and perseverance, people who are not going to quit, resilience, being open to learning and feedback, all of those things. So we have a bunch of characteristics. We look for those both in the application and interview. Then we match them with local agencies. In New York City, foster care and prevention is done primarily by private voluntary agencies. The city does their own child protective. We work with the private agencies. But the history is most of the time the workforce turnover in New York City is between 50 and 60%, maybe a little higher than 50 now. And we've always had about an 80% retention rate year one. So at least 20% better than the system, sometimes 25 or 30. So we look at that way to recruit. And again, if you recruit the right people, we think that's a big part of it. Our training, although we have topics and people always want to hear about the curriculum, we do a lot more around mindset than skills-based. Doesn't mean skills aren't important, but the mindset, every child deserves a family, no matter how old they are. Every family has the opportunity to change and get their kids back. If that can't happen, then permanency is important. There are key things that matter, and you quitting will not help. If you're not going to make it through 2 years, do not take this job. Like we'd rather not take you no matter how great you are, because if you're not going to stay, I don't care how empathetic you are, right? So we do a lot of cohort building and team building. That's one of the things I think I could hear almost in the spirit of what they're trying to do in Florida and Louisiana, right? You want to build a team where they feel supported. We found building a cohort during the training period, they've got each other's back. I'm thinking of quitting. I call my friend, come on, we'll go out for brunch on Sunday. You're not quitting. We're going to make it through. We're going to take this action to make sure that these families get what they need. So our training is a lot around mindset, more so than skills. However, we certainly do family court and substance abuse and all those kind of things as well. The training is before they start work, so they kind of start with some mindset of understanding what's going on. And then we have unwavering support. So our support goes the whole first 2 years that they commit. And it's everything from we assign a specialist as like they carry a caseload of workers whose job it is to check in. How are you? Vent about your frustrations with the workload, with family court. Maybe your supervisor's not as supportive as they could be. We don't allow whining. We allow venting and then problem solving. That's a big difference. People need to get out their frustrations, but then we help them problem solve. We're never supplanting the supervisor. We're always working together with the team and figuring that out. I think that's really, really important. We have support groups, we have monthly meetings, we do recreational and social events. If all of your caseworkers got together once a month or once a quarter and just went out for chicken wings, life would be good. Like it's just that kind of spirit to what we do. On the diversity front, my colleague Gabrielle, who now runs Children's Corps and is our Chief Program Officer, has taken us to yet another level. Some of the things to think about, we work with first generation groups. So someone who came here and doesn't speak English as their first language. Well, in New York, if you don't speak Spanish in certain neighborhoods, I don't care how good you are as a caseworker, you can't help the families. But if you speak Spanish, your written application may not be as strong. We account for that in the application process, right? If English is not your first language, your written applications are not going to be as strong. We look more for, are they saying kind of, do you feel them? And the grammar's not perfect, we could edit that later. So we work a lot on that. We look at colleges that have a diverse population. And at this point, we usually place between 40 and 50 a year. This year's a little lower. The first year COVID hit us. The last 2 years, even with COVID, we did fine. But our numbers are slightly challenged. Part of that is also our salaries have not gone up. But our workforce of around 40 to 50 is typically now 65 to 70% people of color. By their choosing and their definition. I think that's critical to think about how you do that in the work. And then the other thing is we want them to be the future leaders. So our people commit to 2 years. They don't stay a caseworker forever, which some people don't love, but 50% stay in child welfare proper, 75% work in some form of children and families connections. As John pointed, it could be youth development, could be youth, juvenile justice, criminal justice, et cetera. But 50% stay child welfare proper, 75 with children and families. They go back for MSWs and JDs. And now we have some agencies, the director, supervisor, and current worker are all Children's Corps or alum. So you have to invest in your future leaders. We're at a point where a lot of people are going to start retiring. And if we have a workforce issue on the front lines, who's your next generation of supervisors? We're putting together right now a model to help support supervisors because we talk so much about workers. If the workers leave, the supervisor has to cover the caseload and supervise the other workers. So all those things, it's like a holistic approach. Can't tell from the speed that I speak. I'm obviously from New York. We do things really quick, but we really pay attention. I love the work that we do, and I think it's critical for all of us to support each other. We can all work together. What Leslie brought up, bringing up salaries, figuring out how to work as a team, letting your people know that you care. There's some great studies that even without the salaries going up, if the supervisor acknowledges your good work instead of just yells at you when the notes are late, you stay more. Andrew, the innovation with technology has always been something we're trying to capture. You got to figure it out. I will say our work and all the other work, you have to sell this to your legislators. We have to get money for things. You can't do it without money. And to Andrew's point, I just did the math quick. If it costs more to have that software, you get them out in 100 less days, take what it costs per day per kid, and you make it up, and it's better for families. I did the
same thing while she was talking. I was like, right? There's no way that doesn't save you money. Yeah.
So if it saves money and it's better for families, like that's a no-brainer. So
yeah.
I could go on forever, but I'm trying to stick to my time. I think I'm right on 10 minutes, maybe 11. So I'll give it back to John.
You are, and I appreciate that, Barry. And I just one thing before I switch it over to Dean Miller's video that I just hear as like a common denominator in the very different things you guys are talking about to me is it's a little bit of the secret sauce might be just kind of ambush prevention in that, Barry, what you're doing is really stealing up potential workers and making them have a clear-eyed view of what they're getting into. Because if you're going in and you you're not fully aware of what you're going to experience and what environment you're going to be in, I mean, is it a real shock that people would be thrown into something and then leave it? And then on kind of the back end, on the other end, if you go in thinking that what you're going to be doing is working with children and families, and you end up having a job that's like 70% administrative, and all you're doing is paperwork, and all you're doing is waiting around and stuff like that, that's a different way of feeling ambushed, but it's kind of the same deal, so it's really kind of two sides of the same coin to some extent. Okay, let me stop rambling, and hopefully my technological skills I can share back onto the screen. And what you're going to hear here is just a quick discussion from Dean Miller from the University of Kentucky School of Social Work about their self-care lab and what they are finding. So here we go.
I'm Jay Miller. I'm the Dean of the College of Social Work at the University of Kentucky. I also have the privilege of serving as the director of the self-care lab. I'm also a loud, proud foster care alum and former CPS worker, child welfare worker. So spent some time, in terms of having been in the system, if you will, and then moving to a space to work in child protective services. That was really the motivation for getting to a space to launch what became known now as the self-care lab. And the self-care lab is a space that is dedicated to the empirical investigation of self-care and wellness among helping professionals. And as I shared, my journey to that space is very personal. Having been in foster care, I wanted to approach and do the work in a very particular way. I was the first one in and last one out. I wanted to be very engaged and involved in every decision about the kids that I worked for and with. And after several years, what I found is that I myself was experiencing these concepts of vicarious trauma and burnout. And for me, it was this kind of eye-opening thing to where I realized that if I was experiencing that, knowing what it was like personally, I could only imagine what other folks were going through. So at the lab, we are really, really dedicated and honed in on the empirical space of assessing concepts, strategies, approaches to really reconceptualizing what it means to engage in self-care specifically, but workplace wellness and well-being more broadly. And so we run a number of different studies and interventions. We look at practitioners all over the world. We have a project that we refer to as the Global Self-Care Initiative, where we have 17 or 18 different countries where we explore and examine the concept of self-care and what it means in different places and spaces, and kind of some of the cultural implications related to that. And throughout the work, we've found some very interesting things as it relates to the concept of how administrators can approach creating a space where workers can thrive, not survive, but thrive, and where they can do the work that we're asking them to do. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to have a vibrant child welfare system, it is imperative that we have a vibrant and supported workforce. And some of the things that we've learned, I think number one is just because you build it does not mean they will come. In a lot of studies, we find that wellness initiatives are typically housed in an HR kind of capacity or function, and that instead of giving people what they need, we give them what we have. And typically, if I'm being candid, it's a Fitbit and a gym membership. We kind of check those boxes and move on. But we really kind of highlighted or underscored the need for participatory conceptualization exercises. So really getting to a space where we seek to understand how people want to work, where we really reframe the context in which they are working, and then where we think about the support in a different way. Number two, we have learned a lot about generational distinctions. I often say the biggest difference between people is not race and not gender, it's generational. And that plays out in the workspace. And that's not a new concept per se, but to have empirical evidence that really looks at and shows and illustrates the differences in how people think about and conceptualize self-care and wellness can really go a long way in how we think about responding. Meaning that our seasoned workers, we may need to respond to them in a different way than our newer workers. Or we need to think through concepts related to, it's not always just about pay. Now, let me be clear, pay is important and we need to address those issues systemically. But we should not be lured into the space where we think that folks just want money, and if we pushed out more money, everything would be better. That's not always the case. And we found that things like team support, professional development, having spaces where people can grow into and out of, having an adaptable workplace. When I was in CPS, I was an investigator. And I like to be an investigator because I like to come in and I wanted to be on the move and go out and interact and do things out in the community. That said, it's a high stress space. And so sometimes instead of moving someone to maybe a space that's a little less stressed, we tend to let them go. And because we have a concept of how things need to work or be segmented. So reframing or thinking about that workspace differently and kind of rooting it in these generational distinctions and knowing that that needs to inform your response can be really important. And then the last piece is around this concept of retention. We often talk about wanting to retain, and that's really important. But I think we very seldom ask the question, how long should one be retained? And so we've done a lot of work about thinking, what is an ideal time or duration to work in the child welfare space? How long does it take one to experience burnout or vicarious trauma? And in some spaces, it's less than a year where folks start to feel the burnout or the weight of the work that they're doing. We don't talk enough about case load versus case weight. We often think about it in context of how many cases you have, but anybody that's done the work can realize and recognize that every case is not the same. So as we think through what retention efforts look like, we have to think about how that impacts the training and orientation of child welfare workers that we employ. If you know that the workforce turns over every 18 months, keeping them in training for long periods of time may not be necessary or may need to be rethought. Thinking about specialized training versus more generalist approaches. These are all things that we're going to have to start to critically reconstruct and respond to in a way that's meaningful and not just reactive. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the workforce is only going to be able to do the work that they're supported in doing. And having been there myself, I can tell you that I want and hope that we have a workforce that is well, and that we understand when things aren't working the way that they need to. And sometimes it means that folks need to transition into other spaces. And sometimes it means that we need to support them differently. But I think throughout the spectrum of employment, be it front side recruitment and training or backside retention or transition, we have to understand how vital those workers are. And we need to get really creative in how we can support those workers in different and meaningful ways.
All right. So I wanted to, I really, even though he couldn't be here, I wanted to make sure that we got that in. And I'm going to, Dr. Miller said it was fine for me to share his email contact for anybody that would like to follow up and kind of learn more. I'll also drop the link to the self-care lab, but I just think they're onto something and sort of what they're trying to look at there. I did want to ask the panelists real quick what they thought about his comments on retention, because Barry, you kind of set a bit of a bright line on the other side, like the concept of like, if we don't feel like you can last and do 2 years of work, why is it even worth it to recruit and kind of train you? I think what he was kind of posing there from what they've learned thus far with the self-care lab is, do we have an implicit expectation when we talk about retention that for working forever is the high side And like, should we kind of disabuse ourselves and kind of have a more rational conversation? So what do you, Barry, you want to start, and what do you guys think of that?
You know, everything is, we always say it depends is the first thing we teach.
Sure.
It depends. So I don't have enough information to answer each individual worker. CPS is a whole different thing. But the reason we ask for a 2-year commitment, we literally want these people to be child welfare professionals forever. Staying a frontline caseworker is rare. So it's not that you're done in 2 years. Then you go back for your MSW. If you had, then you become a supervisor. Clinical track, you want to be a therapist, but in social work. Law school, but be a lawyer who works in family court, not in litigation. You know, like, so it's giving people hope of a career, not you're a caseworker and you get 3% increases forever. So that's why we think, you know, 2 years, some stay a few, 4 or 5 years, but staying a caseworker for 30 years is not going to usually be good. So I would agree with him on that. How long it is probably dependent on the conditions and the person.
Yeah, Andrew, something to add, or Leslie?
Yeah, well, I would just kind of ditto and piggyback on Barry that it's unrealistic to think that you can sustain your full career at the front line. We know, you know, CPS, even the family services and foster care. I mean, they're really intense programs that, you know, sometimes run on, you know, 9 or 10, you know, each day. So our hope would be that they would come in and become professionally developed to be their very best, and then seek opportunities for advancement, which we have so many within our department, so many avenues from consultant to supervisor management roles to even other departments that, you know, can give, you know, our employees a new lease on their career lives, you know, the adoption program, the home development and recruitment. But it is really important to get people into those critical entry programs at CPS. That's where the first knock on the door and getting that good assessment. So you want bright eyes and bushy-tailed and qualified people who can do really good assessments of child safety right there at your front line. So we really hope we can get that person with the good energy, and providing good training for them is really important. So recruitment and retention in those areas are really huge, but succession planning is our next step in that process, getting the next person ready.
Yeah. Andrew, do you know, as an organization, do you kind of have something kicking around in your mind when you hire kind of frontline and other workers of like, if this person stays X years, that's kind of the sweet spot for us? I think you're on mute.
Yeah. So we did. Yeah, we looked at our tenure in case management, and there really is that 2 year. If you can keep them 2 years, they tend to make more of a career, whether it's continuing in their role or into another role in child welfare. We that 2 year is a pretty magical number. So we've done a number of things trying to figure out how do we, again, like the panel talked about succession planning. So we develop career ladders, right? Like how do you create a pathway? Because some of those individuals love their work with families. They don't want to be a supervisor. They want to continue that direct care work. So we had to look at how do we start professionalizing that career track so people could continue, because there's about 10 to 15% of our workforce like who do this work and have done it for decades. I mean, this is what they like to do. But you're right, that 3% a year increase is, there's always going to be pressure out there, particularly now with opportunities where they can make a tremendously much more. So career ladders is one. The other one I wondered about, we haven't tested it yet, but I want to pilot it somewhere, sabbaticals. How do you give them a break? Give them a break, get them into some professional development or things that they want to do with their career, maybe cycling to other programs. We have a lot of other programs at CHS. Maybe it's a tour of duty in one of our community partnership schools, but giving them that time and space, because it is a grind to stay in child welfare for year after year after year. And so, you know, the 10 to 15% who love it and that's the only thing they want to do, maybe we could bump it up to 20 or 30% because they get that mental break and they say, you know what, I really want to do another year in child welfare. That was really rewarding work to me. So, you know, unfortunately, it disrupts caseloads. And so, you know, I get a lot of pushback from my team saying, yeah, you can't do that. You can't give them this.
Right.
Why not?
Right. Well, we have come up on the hour and we have had some questions in here, but you guys have been great, my panelists here, in responding to them. So I don't think we have any Outstanding. My colleague Sarah is going to drop just a quick survey link in here for folks who have attended. We almost always get this question. No one did it this time, but I always forget to say you will get we will send out a recording of this to everybody who registered, even the people who didn't show up live. And so with that said, I want to just thank you guys, Andrew, Leslie, and Barry, for joining us live today. And I'll personally thank Dean Miller for sharing his thoughts with us as well. And guys, thanks again. And thanks to all of our attendees for joining this conversation. Everybody have a great afternoon.
Thank you.